All right, so we first tested, make sure that nothing was alive. And then we cut the top pair and we folded them up top so we can remember if it goes on the top or the bottom. If you screw up and put the top ones on the bottom on the new one, you'll notice your outlet doesn't work and the ones next to it probably won't either. So that's why it's easy if you just go a little slow, just to make sure you remember your top from your bottom. Your ground wire. Oh, I need a screwdriver.
Here we go. Hold it.
Yes. Okay, for your ground wire, we're just gonna loosen it up. Try to use the loop if you can, but this one's a little botched up. It's gonna be a bigger pain to unfold and try to use it versus me just cut a new one. So I'm just gonna cut it there. We're gonna start with a new one. Now, do you have the...
Yes.
Thank you. So with the needle nose pliers, we're gonna make ourselves a new loop. I do mine a little long and kind of wide too. Something like that, but you wanna leave the opening so it's easy to get the screw in. So that's a pretty good loop. And then we're gonna use, these are 14 gauge wire. So we're gonna use the spot for the 14 gauge and cut off new tips. Maybe a little bit bigger than that. Probably about that. There we go. So this is taking the insulation off of the wire. So when you do it, you don't want to use too tight of a cutter because you're going to cut into your wire and kind of ruin the integrity of it. But if you don't use one that's tight enough, then it won't cut through it. So once we get everything cut, you also want to make sure it's kind of like a straight edge. So I'm going to just trim this up a little bit. There we go. Okay. Now we're ready to put our new... Adam, could you grab a new outlet, please?
Thank you.
Okay. All right. So just since it's on the ground and with us, it's easier if you just kind of start the screws because sometimes they can be a little difficult to tighten. So I just start each one. And then you want to start with your ground wire because this is the hardest one to get, and once these other ones are in, it's harder to maneuver. So once it's in, around the screw, I'm going to kind of push it together. And you'll notice there's kind of two silver brackets on either side of the screw. We want to make sure our wire's between those and it's close to the bottom and not hanging up. So when we tighten the screw, the wire should be snug and not moving. See, that's a little loose still. So I'm just going to So once we have that done, the black wires go with gold, the white goes with silver. That's the biggest thing to remember. These are your power. This is your neutral. So when we put it in, we want it so once it's pushed in all the way, it doesn't pull out when you pull on it. You also want to make sure that there is no exposed copper behind it. A little bit, just a tiny little bit might be okay, but you really don't want them to have much more than that. Any exposed copper wire here could be a fire hazard. So once that's in snug, then we want to tighten the screw the rest of the way. And then we just do the other pair for it, the white side. I like to do the bottom first because it makes it easier once you get towards the top. Good. You'll notice none of the copper is exposed in the back, so that's good. Okay, so these wires are pretty short, so it'll be easier to get in the box, but sometimes you have longer wires. You could use these just to help a little bit. You don't want to rely on it too much because it could pull your wires out of the back. Then we want to try to line it up so it's flush. So that might involve like turning it a little bit left and right. And then we just screw it in.